Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Marc Medley Show. We have not been together in a while, and I am thrilled to be able to share with you again in this episode of my podcast, the Marc Medley Show. And today's episode is not going to be anything new. As a matter of fact, it's probably old hat. It could be considered beating a dead horse. It could be decided or said to be old or old news or whatever you want to call it. If you don't know who you're listening to, by the way, this is your host, Marc Medley. And what I want to talk a little bit about today is the politicization of the virus in some respects is worse than the virus. And I literally had to practice the word politicization, because that's what we've done. We've politicized a health issue. We've taken a health issue and turned it into a political issue for folks to choose sides in something that could care less if you are Republican, Democrat, Independent, don't vote at all, don't care about voting. It is a virus that does not care about your political affiliation, and yet we have politicized what needs to be done in terms of being able to move beyond the virus. From the beginning, the whole notion of wearing masks was fought, and it's still being fought, along with now the vaccine. A vaccine was developed, and albeit quickly, but we are in the 21st century, so I'm quite sure we ought to be able to do things a little bit quicker than we did in the 19th and the 20th century. So I get it, and I hear what folks are saying in terms of it being developed so quickly. But again, given all of our technology, given all of our science, given the education that we have now, there are some things that we ought to be able to develop a little quicker. But it is just ridiculous that we are now 17, 18, 19, 20 months, however many months it is, because it's coming nearly close to 2 years. It's coming close to 24 months. And we are still haggling and arguing about the wearing of a mask or receiving a vaccine. And yet in other viruses and pandemics that we've had, because it wasn't politicized, we were able to move away from it. The Spanish flu, the flu, polio, chickenpox, and on and on and on. There are certain vaccinations that children in school have to get in order to be in school. Otherwise, they can be excluded. There's a list of vaccines and vaccinations that the children must get in order to stay in the general population. I've served in the military, and we were inoculated all of the time because we never knew where we might be deployed. So we always had to be vaccinated up, if you will, or inoculated, because we never knew where in the world we would go, whether it would be typhoid, whether it be smallpox, whether it be malaria, or what have you. We were constantly receiving vaccines throughout my tenure. Every so often throughout the year, based on our shot records, we would have to be vaccinated. And there was no arguing. There was no telling your commander, no, I'm not going to take that. As a matter of fact, even when I was in basic training, we were being inoculated. We were being vaccinated. As children, we received shots for the chicken pox or the mumps or the measles. So I'm not quite understanding what was it that was so different about this particular virus in terms of us protecting ourselves, other than that numbskull we had in the White House when the virus actually came about. It never, ever should have been politicized to begin with. It was a health issue, not a political issue. Because as I said a couple of minutes ago, the virus does not differentiate whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or a moderate, or whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're old, whether you're young now, because in the beginning, in the first stage of the virus, the first variant, it was older, or adults, shall I say, who was contracting it. With the Delta variant, now children are contracting it. So it really does not have a respect of individual or person. And yet we've taken this stance of not wearing a mask as being Republican, or not wearing a mask as being in the Trump camp, or not wearing a mask as whatever. And it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. We've lost close to 1 million people. The count keeps changing. 700,000, 800,000, whatever. It's still close to 1 million people that really probably, had we acted differently, did not have to die, at least from the virus. And the thing is, this is October of 2021, and we are still grappling with this whole notion of wearing the mask. Now kids have returned back to school, because it's even gotten more ridiculous in terms of whether or not the children should wear a mask in school or not. You have the various governors in several states fighting mask mandates, leaving it up to the parents. And the thing is this, again, the virus does not care. You can contract that virus regardless of affiliation. And the data shows that the highest areas of contracting the virus are the areas where they refuse to get vaccinated or refuse to wear masks. Now, I'm an educator, amongst many other things. I work in the school system every day, and I know the challenge we have with young children of keeping the masks on their faces. They'll put them on, but they drop them under their nose just to cover the mouth. Now, this is the thing. If you're going to wear the mask just covering the mouth, you might as well not have it on at all, because the virus can still be inhaled or taken in through the nose. So the whole purpose of wearing the mask is to be able to cover the nose and the mouth to prevent the virus from coming in those two openings, your nostrils and your mouth. And even with some adults, we're struggling to get them. Keep the mask up over your nose. And trust me when I tell you, I hate wearing the mask as much, if not more, than anyone else. As a matter of fact, the hating of the wearing of the mask, for me, I may equal, or you may equal, but it will not surpass my hatred for it. I think it is annoying as I don't know, but you know what? We do what we have to do to stay alive. We do not want to become a part of the next statistical number, whether it's now 800,000 or 900,000 or what have you. You don't want to become a part of that, and nor do you want to take the virus home to your family so that they can become a part of that number. This entire thing has been mishandled from day one. From the time the virus was introduced, from wherever it came from, whether it was from China or wherever it was in the world, it has been mishandled by the leaders. Then it was turned, as I said, into a political football. And it has just spiraled out of control ever since. You have states like Florida and Texas and Kentucky and other states that are just absolutely, the propaganda that's coming out of the mouths of these governors is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous in terms of what they're saying when they're behind these microphones and how they're misleading the folks in their states. This virus is still here. It's still real. It can still be taken in, and folks are still catching it, having to go to the hospital, and yes, they are dying from it. Now, with the vaccine is not a cure. It's not a panacea. It's not saying that once you take the vaccine that you can no longer catch the virus. What the vaccine will do is, at least if you get it, it will slow it down. You may or may not have to go to the hospital, and the likelihood of you dying from it is a whole lot slimmer than had you not taken the vaccine altogether. So just because you're vaccinated doesn't mean you still can't catch it. Now, depending on what part of the country I've traveled in, particularly when I go into the South, like into the Carolinas and in Georgia, there are folks down there that don't give a hoot about wearing a mask. In many instances, my aunt and I would be the only ones in the restaurant or in the store who would be wearing the mask. Most of the other folks were bold. They were emboldened. They were empowered to just walk around as if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic. Because the vaccination is out there, and because many, not all, not enough folks have been vaccinated, it still does not give us a license not to be precautious, not to take the cautions that we need to stay virus free. As much as we want things to go back to normal, and trust me when I tell you, I really would love to go back to pre-pandemic. With all the workarounds and everything that we have to do to try to keep from catching it. It takes so much energy away from everything else that we have to do. In the schools, we spend just as much time trying to figure out how not to get it, what to do if somebody gets it, as we do on trying to teach the ABCs 1, 2, 3s. It's tough enough as it is to educate. And now whenever you put all these other things that you have to do because of the pandemic on top of it, it makes the jobs that much more difficult and challenging. So trust me when I tell you, there is no one who would rather be able to do what we did prior to this thing hitting than I. But the truth of the matter is we can't. We need to do whatever it is we need to do to keep all of us safe. That's why I don't understand why a health issue, and as I said, this is old hat. This is why I don't understand why a health issue became a political issue. And I know I'm not by myself. But people have dug in deep in terms of their thoughts about wearing a mask or getting a vaccine, talking about their freedoms. And yet we didn't talk about freedoms with the measles. We didn't talk about freedoms with the mumps. We didn't talk about the freedoms with any of our with the flu. We didn't talk about freedoms with having to wear a seatbelt. We didn't talk about freedoms with anything else that we've had to do to ensure our safety. And yet for some reason with this one, everyone is talking about, oh, it's akin to slavery, which is ridiculous. Oh, it's akin to the civil rights movement, which is also ridiculous. It's none of the above. For some reason with this one, and I know why it is because, again, as I said, the leader who was leading, or shall I, not leading, during the time when the virus came about. The lack thereof of leadership or proper leadership when the virus was released or uncovered or discovered, whatever word you want to use. The politicization of this is worse than the virus itself, because had we not politicized it, we would have done what we needed to do in terms of seeking a vaccination, taking the steps that we needed to take. Because if you look historically into the Spanish flu pandemic, they did pretty much the same thing. They wore masks, they social distanced, they did what they needed to do. And guess what? We got through it and were able to continue on. But with this one, as long as we're infighting, as long as we keep on standing our ground for not wearing a mask or getting the vaccination, the longer this thing is going to be here. It's not going anywhere because we won't do collectively what we need to do to stop it. Personally, I think it's going to be here for the rest of our days, just like all the rest of them, just like the flu. I mean, we'll learn to manage it, just like flu, smallpox, what have you. We'll learn to manage those things. It's another one of those things we'll learn to manage. Once we can move it out of the political realm, once we can put it back where it ought to have been to begin with, a health issue. It's not a political issue. Now, as you know, when I record these episodes, whether you agree with me or not really is not my concern. You can agree or disagree. The only thing I do whenever I throw an episode out there or when I record an episode is to give you something to think about. The intent of my blog is the same thing, of which I haven't written an edition of that lately. But the intent of that, the critical thinker, is the same objective. It's just to have you think like, well, you know what? I never thought of it that way. I hadn't thought of it from that perspective. I didn't look at it that way. But we need more people to understand that this is not a political issue. It's just not. It's not a matter of Republican or Democrat or whatever they call the Trumpsters. I forget what they had a name for him, but since he's been out of office, I just lost total track of him. But whatever the name is, I mean, the virus doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you support Biden or not. It doesn't matter if you support Trump or not. It doesn't matter if you support Hillary or not. It doesn't matter. The virus does not care. So that's pretty much it. You know, this is kind of like my welcome back episode for a little while. I'll probably be recording more, or more frequently, shall I say. But I just sit here and I watch and I listen as folks banter and go back and forth in all silliness about whether or not they ought to wear the mask. Yes, it's uncomfortable. We got it. Yes, sometimes it's hard to breathe. We got it. Yes, we know the history of the Tuskegee experiment. We got it. We got all of that. But at the end of the day, this virus is still here. Folks are still dying. Folks are still catching it and going to the hospital. And now we have the children who are catching it. Something must give. And I won't even get into what, the long-term effects, because those are still questions that are still unanswered in terms of, for those that did contract COVID, the long-term effects of those. Because I'm convinced, based on a personal experience with family members, that COVID did impact the brain. I'm convinced of that. I'm convinced that for those in the family, or particularly, one or two folks that thought they had it or did have it, and based on how things have played out with their depressions and actions and so forth and so on, I truly believe COVID had something to do with that. So we don't even know the long-term effects of folks who've had it and they didn't die, didn't have to go to the hospital, but they had it and they're still alive. We don't know, because they have this thing called long COVID, where a whole host of other maladies came about, whether with the lungs or whether with the heart, as I just said, with the brain. Folks can't taste, folks can't smell. There are other issues that's come about. We haven't even delved into them yet, because we're still bickering about ways to not catch it to begin with. Simple ways. Annoying, but simple. Wearing the mask. Receiving the vaccination. Simple. Maybe annoying. Yes. But really, it has nothing to do with your freedom or your civil rights or being slavery or enslaved or in slavery or in a Holocaust. Has absolutely nothing to do with any of that. And yet those are all the things that's been associated with a health issue. Slavery, the civil rights movement, the Holocaust. Really? Seriously? And these statements are coming from allegedly educated people, coming from politicians, folks that have multiple degrees and experience. Really? Seriously? All right, like I said, I could go on for days about this one, but really give it this some thought in terms of it's not a political issue. It's a health issue. If you want to know more about me, go to my website. Everything is there. MarcAMedley.com. MarcAMedley.com. That's the portal to my social media sites. It's the portal to anything you want to know about me. I host a radio show each Saturday morning on Brave New Radio. You can log on to that from 6 to 9 a.m. each Saturday morning on gobrave.org. That's GOBRAVE.org. There every Saturday morning from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern Time. But again, if you go to my website, all that's there as well. Again, MarcAMedley.com. No spaces. All one word. MarcAMedley.com. Go there. If you want to find out more about me, there's a contact sheet there. You can always email me or either fill out the contact sheet, or you can call me on the 800 number and leave a message. But there are ways you can contact me. With that being said, have a wonderful rest of whenever you're listening to this. If you're listening in the morning, a wonderful rest of your morning. If you're listening in the evening, the wonderful rest of your evening. Whenever you're listening to it, may you have a wonderful rest of whatever it is.